While COVID-19 both shocked and overtook most of us as we never imagined possible, plagues and pandemics have stalked our species for thousands of years. Charles Kenny was an economist with the World Bank. He is now a senior fellow at the Center for Global Development and the author of The Plague Cycle, the Unending War Between Humanity and Infectious Disease. And Charles Kenny joins us now from Washington, D.C. on that. It's great to have you on the program, Charles. How are you managing?
Thanks. Good. Great to be here. Managing okay under the circumstances.
That is the line of the week, I think. Yes, or maybe of the past year, come to think of it. Let's get some history on the record here, and we'll do an excerpt from your book right off the top. Sheldon, if you would, let's bring this graphic up. In prehistory, infectious disease was widespread enough to play a large role in human evolution, but it still played a comparatively minor role in death, particularly when humans began to migrate out of Africa, outrunning many of the infections of their birthplace. What caused infectious disease to begin regaining the upper hand was when farming became a substitute source of sustenance. This is, you raise many things in the book that are really fascinating and will come as very new information to a lot of people. So let's start there and maybe have you elaborate on this connection between farming and infectious disease.
Well, infections love dense, connected populations. The more humans there are close at hand, the more the virus or the microbe can more targets it has to live in. And agriculture leads to dense and connected populations. Dense because the average sort of farming community has a number of people per square mile or square kilometer of 10, 20 times what hunter-gatherer societies do. But also they stay put. They stay where they are, farming their fields. And one of the things that does is it means if they're not producing goods, rather than going and getting them, they have to trade with other people to get them. So that means that not only are there more people in one space, they're trading with lots of other people, they're interacting with lots of other people. And that's great for disease. It means it can spread all over the place. And so, in fact, a number of the greatest killers in human history only emerged after farming and civilization, after farming in towns, killers like measles and smallpox.
So there's nothing new about the fact that in southwestern Ontario, some of the worst outbreaks were among migrant workers on farms down there. That's been going on for generations.
Forever, yeah.
Forever, okay. Maybe compare COVID-19 with other plagues throughout the course of human history. In any set of metrics that you prefer to use, what do you see?
In terms of death rates, it's actually fairly bush league, and I don't mean to downplay the horrible toll it's taken. But if you compare it to the Black Death that killed a third or a half of the population in Europe, or even more to the diseases that followed Columbus across the Atlantic that wiped out 80 to 90% of Native American populations in the decades after he arrived, it's fairly small. But one way I think it really is historically unprecedented is in its economic effect. The trillions of dollars it's cost. And it tells you the price of a pandemic in a globally connected world.
Well, I presume it's been less deadly because of the three things you outline in your book that are great advantages since the 20th century and on. And they are. Over to you, sir.
So we've had three responses to infection through time. We've had exclusion, sort of staying away from disease, if you will. We've had sanitation, keeping clean. And we've had medical responses, keeping healthy. And actually, the first two have been around forever, pretty much. Exclusion, if you look at communities of primates, they're quite often, if a new primate wants to join, a new monkey wants to join the clan, they're kept sort of away from the troop for the first week or two. And we think one of the reasons might be is to check out, see if they're carrying any strange diseases with them. So that one's been around forever, and it's played a role through history. People with Hansen's disease in the Middle Ages were declared dead unto humankind, but alive unto Christ, and kicked out of cities. In later times, we've seen quarantine and so on, and recently, obviously, we've seen travel bans and we've seen social distancing. All of that's a sort of a form of exclusion, trying to keep away from people, and it works. It can be a really powerful tool for disease, but obviously it carries a really high cost. And certainly in the case of diseases like leprosy, Hansen's disease, it was utterly unnecessary. Then there's sanitation, and that's again sort of goes back to prehistory. Indeed, going back to apes, if you look at apes, they spend a lot of time picking bugs off each other's backs. And actually, the apes at the top of the social standing get the most bug care, just like the richest humans get the best health care. So again, a sort of instinctual approach, keeping clean to keep disease away, and one we've used through history. Some of the earliest cities in the world had fantastic sewage systems. The Cloaca Maxima in Rome took sewage out of a city into the Tiber. Sadly, a lot of other cities didn't, and that led to mass outbreaks of cholera amongst other diseases. But since the late 19th century into the 20th century, more and more cities worldwide have put together fantastic sanitation systems that have basically made cholera a thing of the past over much of the world, for example. And then finally, and the most recent contribution has been through medicine. For most of history, frankly, medicine didn't do much good. One of the cures for the plague was to shave a chicken and stick its backside on the bubo that appeared when you got the plague. Not actually a terribly effective approach to dealing with the plague, as it turns out. But over the last sort of 200 years, we started seeing really effective medical responses. So the vaccine that actually, first of all, was used against smallpox and wiped the disease out worldwide. Here's something that was killing hundreds of millions in the last few centuries and will kill nobody, we hope, in the future. So vaccines, but also antibiotics and a whole bunch of other medical approaches that really have sort of transformed the battle between humans and infection.
Charles, we haven't done too well procuring vaccines in this country. Do you think we should try the shaved chicken just for the heck of it?
I would stick to social distancing and masking, I'm afraid.
Okay,
I think
I'm just
they're probably
asking.
more effective.
I'm just asking. Okay, very good. Women's participation in society. You say it's actually been driven by plagues. How so?
Civilization basically was really bad for women. It was bad for everybody because it led to more infection. But the people who suffered the most were women. And that's because more infection in particular affects the young. Just in order to keep population stable, women in early civilization and up into the 19th century had to have an average of 7 children. Some were having more than 7 children. And this at a time when there weren't antibiotics, there wasn't modern medicine. Having children was an immensely dangerous activity. So lots of women sadly died in childbirth. Maternal mortality was very high. But most women suffered some sort of illness or disability as a result of all that childbirth. That's to say nothing of the breastfeeding and so on. And so it made them into second-class citizens. And indeed, sort of one of the first things you see happen in civilization is women becoming chattel, becoming effectively the property of their husbands. And only with the sort of last 150 years of progress have we seen women really, move towards equality. And there's a lot behind that beyond the decline in fertility, the decline in child death. That means that women on average worldwide now need to have sort of 2.5 children just to keep population stable. There's a lot more to it than that. But I really think one big factor is less childbirth and less mortality and morbidity from that childbirth.
Let me ask you about a strategy that has been tried for, again, many, many generations, and whether it makes sense to do so again today. A chapter in your book called The Exclusion Instinct. Throughout history, our natural response, of course, to a disease is to try to shut ourselves off from it. We try it now as we try to close our borders. I think technically we have a closed border, sort of, between our two countries at the moment. How sustainable an idea is that, in your view, going forward?
Not very sustainable at all. If you look at all of what we've done over the last year in terms of trying to shut down travel, the number of international travelers last year was about the same as it was in the early 1990s. Now, I mentioned Columbus earlier. Columbus going across the ocean in 3 or 4 ships, that was enough to set off this firestorm of disease. If you want to stop diseases traveling across oceans, we can't go back to the 1990s. We have to go back to the 1490s level of international engagement. And nobody's suggesting that. And of course, they shouldn't suggest that. It would be economic and social suicide. So we really can't respond as a general rule by closing borders. Now, I do want to be clear, there are exceptions. If in New Zealand and Taiwan at the moment, they've completely controlled COVID within their borders. And of course, they should have strict quarantine systems in place to stop new infections coming in. But for most of the world, for most of last year, these border controls have done no good, and all they've done is, cause greater hardship, greater economic damage.
How concerned are you about the amount of migration going on in the world today?
I'm very concerned. There's far too little of it. Just to take an example, I got my first vaccine shot a week or two ago, I'm happy to say. And the person who gave it to me was a nurse born in Vietnam. The vaccine she gave me had been developed by 2 Turkish migrants living in Germany. The underlying technology was developed by a Hungarian living in the United States. The company that made it is run by a Greek who lives in the United States. This is the power of globalization. It's what's getting us out of this mess. People moving across borders, collaborating on research, collaborating on innovation is what gave us vaccines within a year of the outbreak of the disease. If we cut down on migration, we're going to cut down on that kind of innovation. We're going to be worse off next time. I'd add one more thing. It's probably fairly obvious to your viewers that I wasn't born in Washington, D.C. I was born in the UK, came to the States 2 decades ago. I met my wife here. About 20% of people in the US who are married to people from another country. It's not just about the innovation and about the research and about the technological advance that comes with people moving across borders. It's also about quality of life. It's about love. It's about making new families. And so we've got to get back and beyond the level of migration we saw pre-COVID, for everybody's sake.
How do I put this? I hate to tell you, but much of what I hear coming out of your country, certainly over the last 4 years, maybe not so much over the last couple of months, but yes, over the last 4 years, has not been we need more migration. It's been build that wall. What do you say about that?
Absolutely. And shockingly, one of the reasons people claimed that it was important to build a wall was to keep out disease. And there's sort of no evidence at all that building a wall does anything to reduce levels of infection anywhere. I would say, if you look at popular opinion polls in the United States, the proportion of people who say they want to see migration kept the same or increased has never been higher. I think most people in America realize how valuable migrants are, and they've learned that even more over the past year, partially because, a lot of them have been cared for by migrants. And so I hope that one of the silver linings out of COVID-19 is an acceptance of how important it is for people to be able to move across countries and around the world.
You mentioned earlier that one of the key things we have going for us now are vaccinations in order to take on the plagues of the modern times. I wonder, we were chatting before we started our interview here. Canada hasn't had a great record in terms of procuring vaccinations and then even after that, getting them into people's arms. But I do wonder whether or not we're doing better or worse than is typical under the historic patterns that you've analyzed. What do you say?
So for most of history, there would never have been a vaccine, right? We've only had vaccine technology since Jenner invented the smallpox vaccine in the 1790s. Between Jenner inventing the smallpox vaccine in the 1790s and getting to global eradication of the disease through vaccination took about 170 years. Now, there's a shorter gap between measles and diphtheria vaccination being invented and rolling out worldwide, a few decades. We're managing this probably in the next year, right? Year and a half, say. So between the disease emerging and most of the world getting access to vaccines, probably 2 years, 2.5 years. It may seem like a long time, and it is far too long, and we should have done far better, and we should be far more prepared next time. But historically, it's pretty good.
Historically, we're doing better now than usually is the case.
The best ever. There has never been a case in history where we've seen such a rapid rollout. Again, it should have been more rapid. We should have had more capacity up front. We should have had a global system in place to make sure that the most vulnerable populations worldwide were vaccinated first rather than the richest countries, some of the richest countries, pardon me. But still, in historical perspective, we're doing really well. So better than ever before and not nearly as well as we should have done.
Let me come at that one more time because I've seen statistics that say it can take 10 to 20 years to develop a virus, historically speaking, to develop a vaccine for a virus, which which is a long period of time, and it was done this time in a year. So that's phenomenal, maybe less than a year. So that's phenomenal. But the procurement and the rollout, the administration, has, I mean, even by historic standards, and again, we feel we're not doing great at it right now, but by historic standards, we're doing better than average?
By historic standards, we're doing fantastically. So if you look at when the measles vaccine was invented compared to where we really tried hard to make sure that every child worldwide was being vaccinated, we're still not there with measles, not even close. But 80–90% of the world's children are now vaccinated against measles. But the gap between inventing the measles vaccine and that happening was decades, not years.
Let me talk to you now to get you to put your economist hat on. And you did tell us earlier that the cost of this pandemic has been astronomical. So I wonder what a global recovery, economically speaking, looks like to you.
Historically, we bounce back quite rapidly from most pandemics. I mean, if you look at the Black Death, for example, there's the third or a half of the European population being wiped out. England and France were fighting the 100 Years' War at the time, and they took a kind of 6-month break to deal with the outbreak of Black Death, but then they were back at the fighting. And in some ways, that's sort of the historical norm. We've seen countries and economies bounce back quite rapidly. I think we're seeing some of that this time. China's economy looked like it bounced back way before the end of last year. The United States, we hope, will follow in the next months. If you look at global trade, it's almost back to its level pre-pandemic. So there are lots of sort of healthy signs overall for the global economy that we're getting back on track. That said, there are a bunch of countries and a bunch of people in those countries that are going to see longer effects. So those countries that are further behind in vaccine programs, I'm afraid I think the effects there will last for at least another year or two. Communities that were worse affected and groups that were worst affected. So in particular, women saw higher rates of unemployment as a result of COVID-19 than men did pretty much worldwide, especially where the COVID-19 pandemic was worse. And I think it's going to take a while for them to get back, not to parity, they were never at parity, but to get back to the gains they had made pre-pandemic. So there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to do to rebuild the kind of flows of people we were talking about earlier, to make sure, make up for a year and a half of lost connections. So I think there will be rumbling effects for the next 5 or 6 or 10 years, but I hope pretty much we're back on track within a year or two. And, there's real hope that we can continue the kind of global progress we were making pre-pandemic in the second half of the 20s.
And let me just understand what back on track means. Does that mean that the people who lost their jobs because of this pandemic will get them back? That the astronomical budget deficits that we're running right now are going to be a thing of the past and we're going to start to balance our budgets again? Is that what back on track means? Back on track means for the employment, I think you're right, that everybody who had a job pretty much will be back in work. We're already getting a lot closer to that. There's some way to go, but we're already getting a lot closer to that globally. And then when it comes to the deficits, no, they'll take a while to pay off. Luckily, interest rates worldwide are still very low at the moment, so that's some reason for reassurance. Still, some developing countries in particular are going to see debt problems, and I think that the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund and so on ought to be helping them with their debt situation. Back on track more broadly, what I mean is that before the pandemic, we were seeing immense global progress, especially, I'm happy to say, in the poorest countries. So you were seeing global poverty rates drop down really fast. Now, the COVID pandemic of last year brought us back up to the poverty rates of 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. But in some ways, that's a sign of the speed of progress we were making, right? That the COVID pandemic, which wiped out economies worldwide, only actually took 5 or 6 years off global progress against poverty. I hope we start making that kind of progress again very rapidly, so that by the end of the decade, we're back on track to basically see extreme poverty, $1.90 a day poverty, wiped out in our lifetime and way before our lifetime. Understood. Let's do one more excerpt from the book in our remaining moments here. And again, I'll ask our director, Sheldon Osman, to bring this up, and people can read along at home. We have the technology, you write, and the resources to confine infection to the status of a minor global annoyance. killing few, temporarily disabling more, but in the bush leagues of death rates. But there is also the pessimistic view. We have the technology, and infections have the natural capacity to become a massive force for global death and decline. And we can make the future even darker by reacting late and at a cost to our liberties. The choice is ours. Okay, in which case, what are the key things that policymakers ought to learn from history about how to manage this or presumably even future pandemics?
We've gone from a world where the average parent had to bury a child before the age of 5 to one where worldwide that is a really rare event. And that is something we have to protect. And what we've learned again over the last year is the only way to protect against the kind of pandemic diseases that cause that level of death is to work together. We can't do it alone. We can't do it just as Canada or just as the United States. In the case of COVID, the disease started in China. It spread because of a useless response in Europe and the United States. It mutated because it was out of control in Brazil and the UK and South Africa. We need the world to work together to stop these diseases before they break out. If we can't do that, to stop them as they break out, wherever they are breaking out, to work together on tests, on treatments, on cures. That's the way we make the world a safe place against pandemics. The only other choice, as I say, is to go back to the level of interconnection we had in the 1400s. And in the 1400s, most of us were living lives of extreme poverty and dying in our 30s. We don't want that. So the only way to go is to get closer together and work closer together in order to make sure that pandemics don't emerge, they don't spread, and they kill as few people as possible.
Are our relationships with, for example, China, too poor right now to prevent what you've just hoped for from happening?
I don't think so. If you look at the smallpox campaign that wiped out smallpox worldwide, as I mentioned, that took place in the 60s and 70s, the height of the Cold War. The US and the Soviet Union worked together. There is no reason at all why the West and China can't work together on this.
That is a very encouraging place to leave this thing. The plague cycle is Charles Kenny's contribution to our discussion at this momentous time in our global history, the unending war between humanity and infectious disease. Charles Kenny, we appreciate that wonderful Canadian accent of yours on our airwaves tonight and wish you Godspeed going forward.
Thank you. Stay healthy.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.